If you're wondering if the new V-STROM 800 is meaningfully better than the V-STROM 650, you're in the same boat as I was before I rode all three V-STROMs back to back, the 650, the 800, and the 1050. But I have a confession to make. I have been madly in love with the V-STROM 650 ever since I rode it for this comparison video a few months ago. So I will try my best to keep my personal bias out of this comparison on all parameters except looks, because that is subjective. The one and only thing that I have criticized on the V-STROM 650 is the outdated look. Yes, Suzuki did update the 800 front headlamp with Transformers type stacked LEDs, but to me the 800 or even the 1050 is not significantly better aesthetically. But the stock exhaust notes are different between the 650 and the 800. Comment below and tell me which one do you prefer. I genuinely found the 800 to be a lot quieter, but before we go any further, let me lay out the current V-STROM trim levels. For the US and the UK, V-STROM 650 and 650 XT aren't going anywhere at the moment. The Australian Suzuki website only shows the XT now. It has also disappeared from the Suzuki India website, but rumor has it that the 800 might be on its way. The V-STROM 800 gets two trims, the 800 Standard, which is called 800 RE in the UK, and the V-STROM DE, which is going to be available in most countries. There are also some accessorized trims like the V-STROM 800 DE Adventure, the 800 Tour, and the 800 DE Tour, which are OEM accessory fitted versions on top of the two main trims, the Standard and the DE. V-STROM 1050 also follows the same pattern. If you're planning to buy one of the three engine configurations, you've got 6 trims to compare, not including the accessorized versions of course. I rode all three engines and I'm pretty clear which one I prefer. But let's talk about my preference later, because this video is to help you make a decision. Right off the bat, the V-STROM 650's 90-degree V-twin makes it a giggle machine. The power and torque felt just right, no fancy quick shifter or slipper clutch, and a good old-fashioned cable-actuated throttle. It does have a barely there electronics package that includes the easy start system, low RPM assist, ABS, and 3 levels of traction control, but none of it feels intrusive. I could lug along at low revs like it was a tractor, but also aggressively twist the throttle and feel a slight punch in the gut thanks to the V-twin torque. And then I rode the 800. Initially, I was disappointed that it was a parallel twin engine and started questioning why Suzuki even made it instead of just facelifting the V-STROM 650. But as soon as I rode the first mile on the 800 DE, I realized an important detail that I had overlooked. Its 776cc parallel twin engine has a 270-degree crank, which is not exactly the same, but it is as exciting as the V-STROM 650 was. And suddenly, I started to appreciate the bump in power and torque, which does not feel too crazy but is perceivably greater than the V-STROM 650. The bidirectional quick shifter, even though overkill for street riding, is pretty slick actually. And despite all my loathe for electronics, I could barely tell if the throttle was cable actuated or ride-by-wire, which is quite impressive at this price point. I personally did not care about the 3 power modes and 2 levels of ABS, but I was impressed at how easy it was to switch between the modes while on the go. The new dash is such a perfect balance between being modern enough for convenience without being too complicated, unlike some of the competitors which I will compare in a follow-up video. I enjoyed this bump in power and torque so much that I got curious about how much better the 1050 might be with its 1037cc 90-degree V-twin. Good that I rode it and found out that it's not the bike for me. The power is more than what I need, and I do not need the electronics except cruise control, which only the 1050 gets in all trims. I certainly did not like the weight of the 1050 and how unwieldy it felt riding back to back with the 650 XT and the 800 DE, which by the way aren't the lightest in their class, but the weight of the 650 or even the 800 DE doesn't severely impact the handling. I could easily ride them like they were sports touring bikes. The 1050 DE has the tallest seat, but the 800 DE has the highest ground clearance. At 5'8", I couldn't flatfoot any of them despite the seats being pretty narrow, but at least the 650 and the 800 height and weight did not feel intimidating. Oh, by the way, this comparison video is not for hardcore off-road enthusiasts, because to me the base V-STROMs are great touring bikes which have been given a DE or Dual Explorer trim for adventure enthusiasts to consider. You can share this video with your friends looking for a touring-oriented comparison of the V-Stroms. But it is surprising that for an adventure touring-ish bike, the 800DE's willingness to tip into a corner, staying stable mid-turn, and exiting corners gracefully was shockingly better than the standard 1050 with a smaller front wheel. The 800DE actually reminded me of the V-Strom 650's ability to corner gracefully. The V-Strom 800 standard or RE with the 19 and 17-inch cast aluminum wheels with tubeless tires would be perfect for munching miles without a worry. The spoked wheels with the tubeless tires on the V-Strom 650 XT definitely look cool, but do not significantly enhance the standard 650's off-road capability. With the 800, that has changed. The 800DE has longer suspension travel, fully adjustable forks and shock, while the 800 standard gets minimum adjustability and a road-focused configuration. And my experience with Suzuki's factory setup on non-adjustable suspensions makes me feel pretty confident that the 800 standard suspension in this base trim would be pretty damn good for touring and street duties. In fact, to me, both the 800DE and the 650 XT suspensions felt equally good. The 1050 standard and DE suspension travel is marginally differentiated, but the wheel and tire configurations does tell them apart. And when it comes to brakes, axially mounted calipers are one of my pet peeves during motorcycle reviews, but the brakes on the 650 XT and the 800DE felt pretty decent for the job. The standard 800 and both 1050s get radial front calipers, which I love. The only mod I might consider would be some high performance brake pads if I were to get the 800, but not because the stock ones are insufficient, but because of my OCD about braking capability being more important than acceleration when it comes to safety. Which brings me to rider aids and accessories. The LED head and tail lights and turn signals are a welcome change on the 800 and the 1050, and so is the new dash, which by the way can be switched between bright and dark mode manually as well as automatically. If Suzuki's serious about its claim to keep the 650 in the lineup, I would hope the future V-Strom 650 also gets LED lights and the new dash. Two features that I would have liked to see on the 800 are sadly missing. One, cruise control. From Suzuki's standpoint, I get that it is a key feature that differentiates the 800 from the 1050, but at least it should have been an option like how KTM does it. And feature number two is smartphone connectivity, which is missing from all three bikes. I mean, on a brand new bike, GPS on the dash would have been a lot nicer than having to mount my phone on the handlebar, which by the way is not a bad option if you can find a good mount for a reasonable price. I use this SP Connect phone mount that has a wireless charging as well as vibration damping, so my smartphone does not go bad. I've used it over 1,000 miles with my iPhone 13 Pro on my XSR 900 before I decided to recommend it. You can use my discount code on their website to get 15% off, and they will ship for free within the US and have a 30-day return policy if you don't like it. Good thing is that the V-Strom 800 and 1050 come with a USB charger right next to the dash, so charging a smartphone on a mount would be a lot more tidier than what I have to do in my XSR. Other than that, 800 electronic suite is pretty simple yet functional. The 800DE is slightly differentiated with a gravel mode and rear switchable ABS. The V-Strom 1050 has a fancier electronics package. Both 1050s get an IMU informed ABS, cruise control, hill hold assist, and a slope dependent control system to avoid stoppies. Now that's interesting. You're coming down a hill and you brake so hard that despite a 6-axis IMU informed ABS, you end up lifting the rear wheel of a 554-pound motorcycle with a 21-inch front wheel. Am I overthinking it, or is Suzuki overkilling it? I'm really curious to know what you think about that feature. Just humor me in the comments, please. The only additional electronic feature that the 1050DE gets over the standard 1050 is a gravel mode and rear switchable ABS. Enough about electronics. Let's talk about what good quality accessories come as standard to save you some aftermarket parts money. The V-Strom 650 and 800 standard get an adjustable brake lever which works, and the 1050 gets both levers adjustable. The 1050 even gets adjustable brake and shifter pedals, while the 800 gets rubber covers on ADV style foot pegs. The 650 foot pegs are still basic. The windshields are adjustable on all V-Stroms with different degrees of ease of use, but none of the three I rode managed to eliminate wind blast or buffeting to the level I would like. And that, by the way, is the case with the stock windshields of all the mid-segment touring bikes that I have ever ridden. If you're like me aftermarket windshields are going to be the answer. I'm going to leave some links in the description for you to evaluate some options. All V-Stroms do have some sort of luggage rack which serves as a basic foundation for add-on luggage solutions. The accessorized trims do get you pretty decent factory options which may not necessarily save you money but definitely save you time and energy. The skid plates on both the DEs are only going to handle light impact. For heavy duty shenanigans, you're going to need aftermarket ones. The plastics on the DE that look like handguards are wind deflectors at best. For protecting my hands and levers, I would get aftermarket barkbusters. The mirrors on the 650 still look like they're from a 90s Honda Civic, but the ones on the 800 and 1050 are slightly better. The narrow seats are fairly comfortable for up to 200 miles ride, but you're gonna need aftermarket comfort seat solution or more brakes if you ride longer. Other than that, for touring, you should be fine. For low-key adventure riding, you may need some extra protection like aluminum skid plates or engine protector bars. For nighttime rides though, I would get auxiliary lights for both standard and DE trims. And just when you thought I was done reminding you about things that you're going to spend money on, it's time to talk about fuel efficiency and service intervals. The V-Strom 800 fuel efficiency is marginally lower than the 650, but the fuel tanks are the same size across the board. The smaller V-Strom continues to have the best range. It also continues to be the one that can run on regular fuel without much complaint. But Suzuki recommends 90 plus octane for the 800 given its compression ratio, which is a lot higher than the 650 and even the 1050, which also needs premium. Regular service intervals on the bigger V-Stroms are slightly less frequent than the 650 and the valve clearance service intervals remains the same. But for some reason, Suzuki's service intervals are a lot shorter than most of the competitors. You may not mind working on the bike, but the cost adds up. Warranty is standard 1 year in the US, while the UK and Australia continue to get better warranty coverage than the US. The price is obviously a consideration, but the difference between a standard 650 and 800 is slim enough in the US for people considering the 650 to be enticed by the 800. In fact, the price difference between the 800 standard and DE models is a lot steeper. 1050 is in another segment of its own but would beat most other manufacturers on price. But then reliability is not even a question on Suzuki's when it comes to my own experience, and that of countless stormtroopers. The real interesting thing to see in the next couple of years would be the impact of the 800's existence on the resale value of the 650. Logically, it could take a hit, but time would tell how the long-term ownership experience of the 800 stacks up against the long-term ownership of a 650. If it's not obvious already, my summary of the three V-Stroms is that the V-Strom 1050 may not be for me, but I reckon it's attractive for riders who have to have a full-size adventure tourer with a full suite of electronics. It does have cruise control, hill hold assist, and stoppie control after all. The fact that 95% of riders won't be able to extract the most out of its capability is probably irrelevant to those who would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. The V-Strom 650 continues to be a great tourer for the engaging engine character, reliability, and an amazing value proposition given the lower cost of fuel and abundant availability of used bikes and aftermarket parts. The dash and overall look is super outdated, but I was willing to live with it until the V-Strom 800 showed up. The standard V-Strom 800 or the V-Strom RE makes a lot more sense for touring enthusiasts. The new electronics are simple and useful for the most part. I mean, on days when it's raining or I'm not feeling sharp, I start to appreciate traction control. A bi-directional quick shifter for street applications still feels irrelevant to me. If I could trade that for having a cruise control, I would do that any day. It competes with the Triumph Tiger 850 and the BMW 750 GS. The 800 DE in my mind competes with the Transalp 750, the Touareg 660, Tenere 700, and the BMW 850 GS. As soon as I can, I will test ride the 800 and the 1050 and compare them with other manufacturers. Please subscribe if you want to watch those videos. In the meantime, you can watch this video where I test rode the V-Strom 650 back to back with CF Moto, Triumph, and Kawasaki and summarize what type of riding each one might work for. That is the video where I fell in love with the V-Strom 650. This is for us helping the rider community one video at a time.